Everything you think you know about Native Americans is a lie. Let's be honest, when most Americans hear the words Native Americans, they picture the same image: a man in a feather headdress, a teepee, a war cry. Basically, a Hollywood cliché from a movie made in 1953. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Almost everything you think you know about Native Americans is wrong. And those stereotypes didn't just come from movies. They shaped school textbooks, politics, and how an entire continent learned to ignore real history. Today, we're breaking 10 of the most common myths about Native Americans, and by the end of this video, you'll realize how absurdly oversimplified this story has been. Myth number 1. All Native Americans lived in teepees and wore feather headdresses. No, not even close. Teepees were used mainly by plains tribes like the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Comanche because they were mobile, practical, and perfect for following buffalo herds. But what about everyone else? In the Southwest, Pueblo peoples built multi-story adobe cities. In the Pacific Northwest, tribes lived in massive wooden houses. In the eastern woodlands, entire communities lived in longhouses. And those iconic feather headdresses, they weren't fashion. They were ceremonial, earned through specific achievements, and used by a small number of tribes, not all Indians. Hollywood turned sacred symbols into costumes. History paid the price. Myth number 2. Native Americans were primitive savages. This myth might be the most insulting of all. Long before Europe figured out proper sanitation, native civilizations were building cities, road systems, and calendars. The Maya tracked astronomy so precisely that parts of their calendar were more accurate than European ones. The Inca built 40,000 kilometers of roads without wheels. No horses, no iron. These were not primitive societies. They were different societies, and difference made Europeans uncomfortable. Myth number 3. Native Americans were naturally violent. Yes, some tribes were warriors. They had to be. Invasion tends to do that, but many others were deeply diplomatic. The Iroquois Confederacy formed a political union based on consensus, shared power, and debate centuries before the United States existed. Violence wasn't a trait, it was a response, and history forgot who started it. If this already challenged a few beliefs, pause for a second. Hit like, it helps this video reach people who still believe the myths. And write in the comments, which stereotype about Native Americans did you grow up with? Now let's go further, because the next myths shaped how an entire nation justified colonization. Myth number 4. Native Americans were one single people. This myth made everything easier. If Native Americans were just one group, then wiping them out sounded simpler, cleaner, more convenient. Reality, they were hundreds of nations, different languages, different religions, different laws, different worlds. The Navajo had nothing in common with the Iroquois. The Maya had nothing in common with the Sioux. Calling them all Indians was never accuracy. It was administrative laziness. DNA research shows their ancestors migrated from Siberia over 15,000 years ago, but after that, their history split in thousands of directions. There was never a single Native American culture. There never was. Myth number 5. Shamanism was their main religion. This is where Hollywood spirituality takes over. Drums, smoke, a mysterious shaman whispering to spirits. In reality, native spiritual life was far more complex. Some cultures were polytheistic, others focused on ancestral spirits. Some had structured priesthoods, calendars, temples, and laws. The Aztecs worshipped entire pantheons of gods. The Maya built rituals around astronomy and time. Many tribes didn't even have anything resembling what outsiders call shamanism. It's a foreign label, not their word, not their system. Myth number 6. Most Native Americans were killed in wars. This is one of the biggest historical lies ever told. Wars were brutal, but they weren't the main killer. Disease was. Smallpox, measles, influenza. Entire tribes disappeared without a single battle. Up to 90% of indigenous populations in some regions died from diseases brought by Europeans, not bullets. Then came forced removals, stolen land, starvation. The Trail of Tears wasn't a battle, it was paperwork, and it killed thousands. Myth number 7. Europeans won because they were technologically superior. Yes, Europeans had guns and steel, but that's not the whole story. They arrived during internal conflicts. They exploited rivalries between tribes. They formed alliances with indigenous warriors. The fall of the Aztecs wasn't a fair fight. It was a collapse under disease, betrayal, and timing. Technology helped. Circumstances decided. If this makes you uncomfortable, good. That means it's working. Hit like if you think history should be told honestly, and comment below which of these myths still gets repeated today, because the final ones might hit even closer to home. Myth number 8. Native Americans didn't really contribute much. This one is especially ironic. Corn, potatoes, tomatoes, cocoa, rubber, tobacco. No Native Americans, no modern global cuisine. Democracy? The U.S. Constitution was influenced by the Iroquois Confederacy. Environmental thinking? The idea of living with the land instead of conquering it came from indigenous philosophy, not Europe. Calling their contribution minor is like saying oxygen is optional. Myth number 9. Native Americans vanished. This myth is comfortable. Dead people don't ask questions. They don't demand land back. They don't challenge national myths. But Native Americans didn't disappear. There are over 6 million Native Americans alive today in the U.S., hundreds of recognized tribes, languages still spoken, traditions still practiced. They didn't vanish. They were pushed out of the picture. Myth number 10. This is all ancient history. This is the most dangerous myth of all, because it allows people to say, that was a long time ago, get over it. But many treaties were broken less than 150 years ago. Boarding schools that erased native languages existed into the 1970s. The system didn't disappear, it evolved. History isn't dead, it's still billing interest. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The myths about Native Americans weren't accidents. They were tools. Tools to justify land theft, tools to erase people, tools to make violence feel necessary. And the scariest part, most of us still repeat them without even realizing it. If this video made you rethink even one belief, share it with someone who still believes the myths. Subscribe if you want history without the fairy tale version, because the stories we tell decide the future we build.